Throughout American history, a handful of names have become synonymous with infamy. People whose actions shocked the nation, shattered trust, or rewrote history in blood and scandal. Some believed they were serving a higher cause. Others were driven by greed, power, or pride. Yet all share one thing in common. Their legacies are warnings carved into America's conscience. From the theater box at Ford's Theater to the crime-ridden streets of Chicago, from the Senate floor to Wall Street's penthouses, these are the stories of the most notorious Americans in history. John Wilkes Booth. It was a mild spring evening in Washington, April 14, 1865. The Civil War had ended just 5 days earlier. The city buzzed with relief, laughter, music, and the sound of a country finally exhaling. President Abraham Lincoln, exhausted yet hopeful, decided to attend a play at Ford's Theater. Our American Cousin. In the audience that night was John Wilkes Booth, tall, charming, and famous. To the public, he was one of America's most celebrated actors. To those who knew him privately, he was obsessed with the Confederacy and enraged by its defeat. He believed Lincoln had destroyed the South, and that by striking him down, he could make himself a hero to history. Booth had planned the assassination carefully. He knew every hallway, every creaking floorboard inside Ford's Theater. He waited for the perfect moment, a line in the play that always drew laughter. As the audience roared, Booth slipped into Lincoln's private box, aimed his single-shot pistol, and pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed over the laughter. Lincoln slumped forward. Mary Todd screamed. Booth leapt over the railing to the stage, catching his spur on a flag and breaking his leg in the fall. Still, he rose, raised his knife, and shouted, "Sic semper tyrannis! Thus always to tyrants!" He limped off stage and out the back door to a waiting horse. What followed was one of the largest manhunts in American history. Booth and his accomplices fled south through Maryland and Virginia, hiding in swamps and barns, fed by sympathizers. For 12 days, the nation seethed with grief and fury. Soldiers eventually cornered him in a tobacco barn at Garrett's farm. Booth refused to surrender. When the barn was set ablaze, a soldier fired through the slats, hitting him in the neck. Paralyzed, Booth lay on the dirt floor and whispered his last words, "Useless, useless." Lincoln's death transformed him from a divisive leader into a martyr. Booth, once adored on stage, became a cursed name, the man who silenced a president at the dawn of peace. Al Capone. Fast forward half a century to the roaring 1920s, a time of jazz, speakeasies, and prohibition. America was supposed to be dry, but liquor flowed freely through the hands of gangsters who turned the law itself into a business opportunity. At the center of it all stood Alphonse Al Capone. Stocky, immaculately dressed, and terrifyingly calm, Capone ran Chicago like a king. His empire spanned illegal breweries, gambling halls, and brothels. He made tens of millions of dollars each year and controlled politicians, judges, and police officers with cash or bullets, whichever got the job done faster. Capone's rule was brutal. Rival gang members turned up dead in alleys. Businesses paid protection money or burned to the ground. Reporters whispered that Capone had eyes everywhere, from City Hall to the morgue. Yet in public, he smiled for cameras, donated to charities, and opened soup kitchens during the Great Depression. To the poor, he seemed like a gangster with a heart. But on Valentine's Day, 1929, that illusion shattered. 7 members of a rival gang were lured to a North Side garage under the pretense of a meeting. Moments later, men dressed as police officers entered, lined them against a brick wall, and opened fire with Thompson submachine guns. The air filled with smoke and the sharp metallic stutter of gunfire. When it cleared, the wall was dripping red. The St. Valentine's Day massacre horrified the nation. Newspapers splashed Capone's name across front pages. Though he was never charged for the murders, everyone knew who had ordered them. Eventually, it wasn't murder that brought Capone down. It was math. Federal agents led by Elliot Ness and his team, nicknamed the Untouchables, tracked the paper trail of unpaid taxes. In 1931, Capone was convicted of tax evasion and sentenced to 11 years in prison. He arrived at Alcatraz in 1934, stripped of power and surrounded by men he once ruled. Years of untreated syphilis eroded his mind. By the time he was released, he could barely recognize anyone. The man who once terrorized a city died quietly in Florida in 1947. A broken relic of a bygone age. Capone's empire dissolved, but his legend endured. A reminder that charm and cruelty can wear the same tailored suit. Joseph McCarthy. Now we move to the 1950s, the dawn of television and the height of the Cold War. Fear was everywhere. The Soviet Union had the bomb, China had fallen to communism, and Americans saw enemies lurking in every shadow. Into that atmosphere stepped Senator Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin, a man with a booming voice, sharp eyes, and a gift for outrage. He realized something powerful. Fear could be a weapon, and accusation could be theater. On February 9, 1950, McCarthy gave a speech claiming he had a list of known communists working in the State Department. The number on that list changed constantly. Sometimes 205, sometimes 81, sometimes 57. But it didn't matter. Americans were already terrified. McCarthy gave their fear a face. For 4 years, he wielded near absolute power. He hauled government officials, military officers, professors, and Hollywood writers before televised hearings, demanding they confess to communist ties. The accusation alone could ruin someone's life. Careers ended, families broke apart, and thousands were blacklisted. All without evidence. Television turned McCarthy into a star. His speeches were fiery, his questions cutting. He accused, interrupted, and humiliated. The public either feared him or admired him for his boldness. He didn't just claim to expose traitors, he claimed to save America. But his arrogance grew too large. In 1954, McCarthy turned his attacks toward the U.S. Army. The Army-McCarthy hearings were broadcast nationwide. For the first time, the public saw his cruelty up close. The smirk, the interruptions, the way he twisted words. And then came the moment that broke him. During one heated exchange, Army lawyer Joseph Welch looked straight at McCarthy and said, "Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of decency?" The words cut through the room like a blade. The crowd erupted in applause. McCarthy's spell over America was broken. By the end of the year, the Senate censured him. His influence evaporated almost overnight. McCarthy drank heavily and died in 1957 at the age of 48. His name became a byword for reckless accusation. McCarthyism, the act of destroying others through fear and lies. He left behind no empire, no riches, no loyal followers. Only a cautionary tale about how paranoia can be more dangerous than the enemy itself. Bernie Madoff. Decades later, a different kind of predator emerged, not with guns or power, but with charm and spreadsheets. Bernard Madoff was the ultimate insider, wealthy, respected, and brilliant. He founded his own investment firm, served as chairman of NASDAQ, and seemed to have discovered the secret to effortless, consistent profit. His returns were too perfect. 10 to 12% every year, no matter what the market did. In a world of risk, Madoff offered certainty. Clients lined up to invest. Celebrities, hedge funds, and charities begged him to take their money. Getting into his fund became a status symbol. But the truth was brutal. Madoff wasn't investing at all. He was running a massive Ponzi scheme, using money from new investors to pay returns to older ones while skimming millions for himself. His operation ran for decades, built on reputation, exclusivity, and human greed. He created an illusion of sophistication, sleek offices, complex charts, and fake trade confirmations printed on expensive letterhead. The numbers were fiction, but no one dared question them. Regulators investigated multiple times, but Madoff's prestige shielded him from suspicion. It all unraveled in 2008, when the global financial crisis hit. Investors wanted their money back, but the cash wasn't there. The machine jammed. On December 10th, Madoff confessed to his sons that the entire business was one big lie. They reported him the next day. The numbers were staggering. $65 billion in fabricated profits, thousands of victims, and lives destroyed. Charities folded. Retirees lost everything. Families that had trusted Madoff for generations were left with nothing but debt and shame. Madoff's own family fell apart. His son, Mark, took his own life exactly 2 years after his father's arrest. Another son, Andrew, died of cancer in 2014. Madoff lived to see it all, imprisoned for the rest of his life. He died in 2021, unrepentant and alone. He didn't rob with guns, he robbed with trust. And in many ways, that made him more dangerous. These 4 men couldn't have been more different. An actor, a gangster, a senator, and a financier. But they all shared one chilling trait. They hid darkness behind respectability. Booth thought he was a patriot. McCarthy claimed he was saving America. Capone styled himself as a businessman. Madoff promised security and prosperity. Each cloaked destruction in something that looked noble. Their motives were different. Booth's fanaticism, Capone's greed, McCarthy's lust for relevance, Madoff's hunger for prestige. But the result was the same: devastation. What makes their stories so haunting is not just what they did, but how easily people believed them. They operated in plain sight. They were admired, respected, even celebrated. And that's the hardest truth. Infamy often begins with fame. In the end, each man left behind a wreckage far greater than himself. A shattered nation, a city drenched in blood, a country gripped by fear, a generation robbed of its savings. Their stories are warnings, reminders that power and charisma can be masks, that greed can hide behind generosity, and that those who claim to protect us can sometimes do the most harm. And that's what makes them the most notorious Americans in history.